Hello, and welcome to part 1 of this tutorial about making a drum and bass tune. In this tutorial I will go through the process that I went through for my kick drum, and I will also show you some of my favorite plugins to use, all of which I would thoroughly recommend. Right, let's get cracking. I usually layer 2 kicks together, one for the top end, and then one for the bottom end, and then bus them both to the same channel for further processing. So let's open up this EQ now and see what we can find. Before I begin, I will start by talking briefly about this EQ plugin. It is a really nice EQ because it is nice and large, and you can make some really nice surgical cuts and boosts in your curve. It also has an undo and redo button. This is bloody marvelous because you can very quickly compare different EQ settings that you might be trying out, so it gives you much more flexibility when you are experimenting. It also has different viewing options, an onboard analyzer, and mid-side options. I will cover both of these in another tutorial all about this plugin. I highly recommend this plugin, especially for beginners because it is so easy to use. Okay, so let's talk about what I have done here in my EQ. The first thing I did was completely cut off the low end, up to 85 Hz. The reason I have done this is to leave space for my sub-bass, which will be booming in this area. Next up, I have added a boost at 100 Hz. Oh yes. Generically, a lot of drum and bass kicks are low cut, at around 80 to 110 Hz, and a slight boost can often be applied wherever the peak in the low end is. The next thing I have done is applied a nice little surgical cut around 350 Hz, to take out some of the muddiness, and make more room for the boost that I made. I had to try different positions with this cut to find out where most of the muddiness was lying. This is where the undo and redo buttons can come in bloody handy. So, for example, I could try moving the cut over a bit, and then maybe a bit more, and now I can toggle my undo and redo buttons to find out which cut seems to be the most efficient at reducing muddiness but at the same time not cutting into any boosts. Finally, I have boosted the top half of the frequency curve, a very small amount, and high cut everything above 16K. This is because a lot of drum and bass gets mastered to vinyl, and if that's the case, then everything above 16K will not be able to be heard. This is partly what gives vinyl its warm sound. Okay. So the next thing I have used for my kick is a bloody marvelous plugin called Alloy, which is made by Isotope. This is an all-in-one channel strip plugin that has all of your common processing needs, plus a few extra features. Don't worry, I will go through this plugin in detail in another tutorial, but for now, let's just have a look what I have used it for in this track. Although I have applied EQ already, I have applied a little extra boost at around 9K. Alloy's EQ curve is really nice and smooth, and if used like this, it can be a really nice way to polish off your EQ'd kick to perfection. The most important thing when adding processing to anything is to learn when to stop adding. If you're going to add any further processing to a sound, always ask yourself, how could it sound better, and what do I want to achieve? That way you will start to pay more attention to the decisions that you make in your tunes. Okay, that is enough EQ for this track. The next thing I have done is use the Transient Designer. This is a really useful tool, and it really helps bring out punch and snap in your percussion. The way it works is, it shapes precise transients along your curve, by using the attack and sustain sliders below. Now, because I have applied some boost around 100 Hz in my EQ, I have also applied a tiny bit of transient shaping to this region. Then to add a bit of top-end snap I have applied a bit of shaping around 9K, which is also where I added my boost. As you might have noticed, I have not applied a great deal of transient shaping. The transient section can have a really strong effect on the sound, and in this case not much is needed. But if you crank it up a bit more, then if used correctly, it can really add a nice bit of wallop to your kicks and snares. But not to your salmon, no, salmon requires a different approach. Okay. So the last bit of processing I have applied to this track is Logic's own envelope shaper. By bringing the release gain down and the time up, I shorten the tail of the kick off a bit. This just gives it a tighter feel. I will now just quickly show you the difference that the envelope plugin makes to my kick by playing it with and without the envelope shaper working. Let's have a listen. Okay, so at this point, I want to add some bottom end to my kick. This time I have loaded up my sample into Logic's EXS24 sampler. By routing the cutoff filter to envelope 1 via the router, you can get some really nice control when shaping your sound. Okay, looking back at the inserts panel over here, you can see that this time, I have applied an envelope shaper even before any other processing. Most people would say you should always start with EQ and compression when processing your audio. For the most part I would agree, but you should still have a play around with the order in which you apply your inserts, because the difference can be really drastic. Drastic reggae fantastic. So, as you can see, I have messed around with the order of my plugins and I found that when I applied the envelope shaper first, it gave me the feel I was looking for. Now, if I open my EQ up, we can see that this curve has been shaped differently to the one on the other track. I have still applied a low cut and then a boost at 100 Hz. But I have also put a few notches in the mid-range. This is because my other kick is filling out those frequencies nicely enough. So I don't want too much more going on in this area. Finally, I have added a tiny boost at 4K to bring out a small bit of top-end thump on my kick, and then I have cut the extreme high end off again. Bish, bash, a bosh. Okay, let's take a look at what I have done in this instance of alloy now. The first thing I have used is the exciter. When applied in small amounts it can add some really nice, clean distortion to your audio. After this I have used some more transient shaping, but just on the low end. Because there is more low end in this kick, I have used a compressor to control the peaks, but I have not added any makeup gain. This can be added later. So now I have shown you how I processed my top end kick and my bottom end kick. Now let's look at how I processed them both together. I started off with another instance of alloy, and applied a teeny tiny bit of top end EQ. Some extra transient shaping in their usual place, and then a compressor to glue all that processing together, just for good measure. The next thing I have done along my inserts is quite controversial. I have added a loudness maximizer and then an EQ after it. Generally it's not good to limit any of your tracks like this. You should leave all the loudness maximizing till the end. Then, you can apply it to the master output. The key is to get a really nice sounding mix down with no little limiting going on, and then, apply loudness at the very end. This way you won't be compromising any of the dynamic range that your audio might have. The reason I did this in my own track was because I wanted to make the kick temporarily loud, and in the end I forgot to make the adjustments. Because I have done this, I will have compromised the quality of my kick sample. Boo-hoo, bad production taxi for one please. That is it for this tutorial. I hope you have picked up some useful information here. The next video I will cover will be about how I went about layering my snares together. Thanks for watching, see you next time.